11 years had passed since the night my family cast me out. But standing here at the manicured entrance to the Oakwood estate, the opulent venue chosen for my sister's wedding, I realized the ache in my chest had never truly left. It was a phantom limb, a cold space where a family used to be. The invitation had come from a distant aunt, a woman who always suspected the truth, and my husband Marcus had convinced me it was time. "You're not that girl anymore, Alara," he'd said. "Let them see who you are now." He was right, but the ghost of that girl, shivering on the curb with a single suitcase, was still a part of me. The memory of it all came rushing back, not as a summary, but in sharp, agonizing scenes. I was 18, sitting in the sterile, hushed quiet of the bank manager's office, the faint scent of lemon polish in the air. My acceptance letter to my dream university felt heavy in my bag. The manager, a kind man named Mr. Harris who had given me lollipops as a child, couldn't meet my eye. "I'm sorry, Alara," he'd said, pushing a stack of withdrawal slips across the polished mahogany desk. "The final transfer was made 2 weeks ago. The account is closed." My breath caught. "Closed? That's not possible. That's my grandmother's trust. It's for tuition." I picked up the top slip. The signature was unmistakable, a sharp, arrogant slash of ink. My father's. Every single slip bore his name. The withdrawals hadn't been a lump sum, but a slow, methodical bleed over the past year. Thousands at a time, lining up sickeningly with Grace's European tour, her new convertible, her shopping sprees in the city. A cold dread, heavy and absolute, settled in my stomach. That night, the dam of our family's civility burst. I laid the slips on the dining room table where my parents were having their evening coffee. My father glanced at them, his expression unbothered. "What is this?" he asked, his tone already defensive. "Mr. Harris gave me these," I said, my voice shaking. "The account is empty. My college fund is gone." My mother set her cup down with a delicate clink. "Don't be so dramatic, Alara. It's not gone. It was reallocated." "Reallocated? To what?" The answer was already hanging in the air between us, as obvious and ugly as the lie itself. "Your sister has a different path," my mother said, her voice devoid of warmth. "She needs to cultivate a certain life, to meet the right people. These things are investments in her future." "An investment? A Chanel wardrobe is an investment? I worked my entire life for this. Grandma left that money for my education." I turned to my father, pleading. "You stole my future." His face hardened into a mask of cold fury. "You have your brains. You'll figure it out," he said, echoing my mother's chilling logic. "Grace needs our help. Your incessant focus on academics is frankly a bit common. You show no gratitude for the sacrifices we've made." From the top of the stairs, Grace watched, a silent silhouette in the dim light. She clutched a new handbag to her chest, her expression unreadable. She never said a word. The argument escalated, my desperation crashing against their stone wall of denial until my father pointed a trembling finger toward the door. "If you can't be a supportive member of this family," he boomed, his voice echoing in the hall, "then you're not a part of it at all." Now, I stood under a grand floral archway, Marcus's hand a warm, steady presence on my lower back. Our 5-year-old daughter, Lily, fidgeted with the satin ribbon on her dress, oblivious to the emotional minefield we were about to enter. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume. I smoothed down my silk dress, a deep emerald green, a color that radiated a confidence I was borrowing from the woman I had become. Before my family even saw me, a familiar face broke from the crowd. It was Eleanor Gable, our old neighbor, a woman whose kindness had been a small light in my teenage years. Her eyes widened, a perfectly painted lipstick smile faltering in surprise. "Alara? My goodness, is that really you?" she exclaimed, pulling me into a gentle, lavender-scented hug. "Helen told me you'd moved to Australia and had simply lost touch. How wonderful to see you." And who is this little angel? It's so good to see you, Mrs. Gable, I said, my heart pounding. So that was the story. Not dead, just distant. Erased with a plausible, untraceable lie. This is my daughter, Lily. And my husband, Marcus. Mrs. Gable was charmed, but her brow furrowed in confusion. Well, I'm shocked your mother didn't mention you were coming today. We were just speaking. She was going on about Grace's incredible match with Daniel, how her daughters had made her so proud. Her voice trailed off as she registered the implication. She saw the quiet strength in Marcus's posture, the expensive cut of his suit, the vibrant confidence in my eyes. She was a shrewd woman, and she could sense a story that didn't add up. From across the lawn, I saw Grace, surrounded by a flutter of bridesmaids in pale blush dresses. She was laughing, but it didn't reach her eyes. She clutched a champagne flute so tightly her knuckles were white. I just need everything to be perfect, she was saying to a tall brunette, her voice a high, tight wire of anxiety. Daniel, his family is so pristine. There's no room for mistakes. Not today. Her eyes scanned the crowd constantly, a nervous tic she'd had since childhood, searching not for familiar faces, but for threats. Then her gaze swept past a cluster of guests and landed on me. The champagne flute froze mid-air. For a split second, I saw pure, undiluted shock, quickly replaced by a flicker of something I recognized all too well, fear. Fear of what? Of me? Or of the truth I carried with me like a second shadow? Her panic was a contagion. It jumped to my mother, whose head whipped around to follow Grace's terrified gaze. My mother's smile, plastered on for the benefit of her new, wealthy in-laws, dissolved. She set her glass down with a sharp click and began moving towards us, a shark cutting through placid waters. Lily, sensing the shift in tension, pressed closer to my leg. Marcus squeezed my hand gently, a silent message, I'm right here. What are you doing here? My mother hissed, arriving before us. Her voice was low, but it sliced through the ambient music. Her eyes blazed with a proprietary fury, as if I were trespassing on her life's greatest achievement. She ignored Marcus and Lily completely. Hello, Mother, I said, my voice even, calm. It was the calm that always infuriated her the most. Aunt Carol invited us. Carol has no right. This is a private event, she snapped, her composure cracking. She leaned in closer. You need to leave. Now. Before you make a scene and embarrass Grace. Before I could respond, Marcus stepped forward slightly, positioning himself between us. His presence was not aggressive, but it was absolute. Actually, Helen, he said, his tone perfectly polite, my wife is a guest. We wouldn't miss this. Especially since she is the CEO of MOVA. His words rippled through the small group of guests who had turned to watch, including Mrs. Gable. The name MOVA, a leader in biotech innovation, was a brand synonymous with success, a name that graced financial news headlines. You could see the mental calculus happening on my mother's face as she tried to reconcile the discarded daughter she remembered with the name Marcus had just dropped. The shame my parents had sewn into my name felt threadbare against the fabric of what I had created. My mother was speechless. It was Lily who broke the spell, tugging on my dress and pointing towards the bride. Mom, she asked in her clear, high voice, is that lady in the white dress your friend? The innocence of the question was a wrecking ball, highlighting the absurdity of it all. Here was a child who had no idea the woman in white was her aunt, that the woman glaring at us was her grandmother. Just then, the groom approached, drawn by the palpable tension. He was handsome, with a kind, intelligent face. Daniel Croft, he said, extending a hand to Marcus, his eyes sharp and analytical. I don't believe we've been introduced. Marcus Thorne, my husband, replied. And this is my wife, Elara. Daniel's smile tightened just a fraction. He looked from me to my mother's stricken face, then back again. Elara, he repeated, testing the name. He looked directly at me. Forgive me if I sound ungracious, but I didn't even know Grace had a sister. It was the first thread he would pull that would unravel everything. My mother shot me a look of pure venom, a silent command to lie. But I was done. I'm not surprised, I said to Daniel, my voice quiet but firm. My family and I have been estranged for some time. Estranged? Daniel's brow furrowed. He glanced at Grace, who was now watching from a distance, pale as a ghost. Grace told me, she said her only sister passed away years ago. The lie was so audacious it stole my breath. Passed away. They had literally killed me off. Marcus's hand tightened on mine. She didn't pass away, Daniel, he said, his voice laced with cold anger. When she was 18, her parents emptied her college trust fund for Grace's vacations. She was disowned for objecting. She spent the next 4 years working 3 jobs to put herself through night school. Daniel's face remained a polite mask, but I could see the gears turning behind his eyes. He wasn't a fool. Grace had likely chosen him for his stability and intellect, never imagining that same intellect would be her undoing. He excused himself with a nod, but his eyes promised this wasn't over. My mother scurried after him, no doubt to spin more lies. I needed a moment away from the prying eyes. I gave Lily a kiss, asked Marcus to watch her, and made my way towards the manor. I found an empty library, the air smelling of old paper and beeswax. A few minutes later, Daniel found me there. I apologize for the scene out there, he said quietly, closing the door behind him. I'm trying to understand something. He gestured for me to sit. Grace told me her sister died in a car accident. A tragic story. She grieves for her every year on the anniversary. I just looked at him. I didn't have to say a word. I also just overheard Eleanor Gable telling someone she was shocked to see you because your mother had told her you were living in Australia, he continued, his voice methodical. 2 very different stories. And then your husband mentions a stolen college fund. He paused, watching my face. My first wife, she was a pathological liar. It ruined me for a time. I told Grace when we met that honesty was the only thing I demanded. Absolutely. He wasn't asking for the whole story. He was a scientist gathering data, looking for confirmation of a hypothesis. The truth, I said softly, is that my parents chose to invest in one daughter's social success at the expense of the other's education. When I refused to pretend it was okay, they wrote me out of their lives. It seems they simply chose different ways of explaining my absence to different people. He nodded slowly, his jaw tight. Thank you for your candor, he said, his expression grim. He left without another word. I felt a wave of exhaustion. I hadn't come here to ruin Grace's wedding. I had come to prove to myself that I could stand in the same room with them and feel nothing. But that was a lie I told myself. I headed to the ladies' room to splash some cold water on my face. The woman in the mirror was a stranger to the girl who had fled this family. Her eyes held a strength forged in loneliness and determination. But just as I began to recompose myself, the door swung open and Grace swept in, her white dress a frantic storm of silk and lace. She slammed the door shut. What are you doing? She whispered, her voice trembling. Why are you here? You are supposed to stay gone. I was invited, Grace, I said calmly. You're making them look like liars, she hissed. They are liars. Why are you doing this to me? She cried, tears welling. Why ruin my wedding? I looked at my sister, the person who had stood by and watched my life be dismantled, and I felt a profound pity. She was trapped in a cage of her own making. I'm not doing anything, Grace, I said, my voice soft but unyielding. I'm simply existing. The truth ruins itself. Please, she begged, her composure finally breaking. Please, Elara. Just leave. I'll pay you back. I'll do anything. Just don't let Daniel find out. He values honesty above everything. The door opened again. It was Daniel. He took in the scene, Grace tear-streaked and pleading, me, calm and resolute. "Grace, darling," he said, his voice smooth as glass. "It's time for the toast." But before we go, he turned his gaze on her, and I saw the cold precision that likely made him a brilliant doctor. "My old mentor from Stanford, Dr. Albright, is a guest today. He's head of the cardiothoracic surgery department." Grace's face went ghostly white. "Albright," she stammered. "The name, it sounds familiar." Daniel's smile didn't reach his eyes. "It should. I was just speaking with him. He prides himself on knowing every surgical student." He took a step closer. "You told me you graduated with honors from Stanford. Why is it I've never once heard your name from any of the faculty I know there?" My mother and father now stood frozen in the doorway, their faces masks of horror. "Daniel, this isn't the time," my mother began, but he ignored her. His eyes were locked on his bride. "Was it a misunderstanding, Grace? Did you misunderstand me when I told you that my first wife lied to me, and that I would never, ever tolerate that again?" He paused. Then came the final, devastating blow. "A moment ago, your father, trying to smooth things over, told me you completed most of your degree remotely because of family health issues." He looked back at Grace, his expression turning to ice. "I just called a contact in the registrar's office. Stanford Medicine doesn't offer remote degrees. Never has." It was over. Her shoulders slumped in defeat. The entire glittering facade of their life shattered into a million pieces. The sound of my father's sharp intake of breath was the only noise. Their lives collapsed, not because I fought, but because the truth stood taller. And there it was. The vindication I thought I wanted. But watching Grace crumble, seeing the pathetic, terrified faces of my parents as their world ended, I didn't feel triumph. There was no joy, just a vast, hollow emptiness. Revenge was a phantom, just like the ache that used to live in my chest. A family had died that night 11 years ago, this was just the burial. Victory felt like standing alone in a graveyard. The real win wasn't their downfall, but the fact that I had built a life so full, I no longer needed their world to be whole. I turned and met Marcus's eyes across the room. He understood. He collected Lily, who was happily eating a cupcake, and we walked out, leaving the wreckage behind us. No one tried to stop us. As the heavy oak doors closed behind me, I felt a lightness I hadn't known in over a decade. The phantom ache was gone. Driving away, the estate shrinking in the rearview mirror, Lily chattered about the pretty lights. Marcus reached over and took my hand. He didn't ask if I was okay. He knew I was more than okay. I was free. I had spent 11 years thinking I had lost my family. Tonight, I realized I had only lost chains. They had forced me to build a foundation of my own, one made of resilience and hard work, not of deceit and entitlement. My success wasn't my revenge. My peace was. What happened back there was no longer my story. It was the consequence of their own choices, a debt that had finally come due. Lies can glitter for a time, but truth endures.